they blur this line between fantasy and reality. And they may know better. They may suspect it's a Chris Hansen sting operation or an FBI sting operation or any local police sheriff's department. But they do it anyway because they get so caught up in this, fulfilling this fantasy, that they blur the line. The predator always goes for the most vulnerable, right? And not always do they start out to take advantage.
Yeah.
But once they get a sense of success or how easy it is, and it becomes financially lucrative or emotionally lucrative, they keep going until they get caught.
All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. My guest today is an 8-time Emmy Award winner, and you probably best know him from Dateline or Catch a Predator, but he's the first guest I've ever had on my show, where I'm glad to be introducing him to all of you and not having him introducing himself to me, because the last thing you want to hear if you're in someone's living room or kitchen is, "Hi, I'm Chris Hansen. Grab a seat." So I'm super glad that I'm the one introducing him. And he's got a podcast out right now called Predators I've Caught. I'm super fascinated by this man. It's kind of a giveaway as to who it is. So Chris Hansen, welcome to the show.
Ed, thank you very much. I suppose you're going to tell me to have a seat for this, right?
That's exactly what we're doing. And I'm fascinated by you, Chris. The work you've done, your life, you've really had a unique seat, so to speak, and a viewpoint in the world that's really unique only to you. I'm curious to begin with, because now everybody, they're recognizing that voice. And if they're watching this, they recognize the face. And I'm curious, when you started to do Catch a Predator and the Dateline work, what preparation did you have? In other words, were you qualified? Did you feel qualified to sit behind the scenes and then walk into someone's living room and have that conversation with somebody? Did you have preparation to do that?
Well, nothing from a therapist standpoint or any experience in law enforcement, except Ed to, have done investigative reporting for, several years running up to that, both at NBC and in local news beforehand. But nothing can prepare you for that very first To Catch a Predator episode. When I pitched it to Dateline, it was never meant to be a continuing series. It was meant to be, a one-off story for Dateline, exposing men who go online to sexually assault children. And we had become aware of Perverted Justice, the online watchdog group, which at that time would put decoys into chat rooms. And if they got hit on and there was a solicitation by an adult, they would merely post that person's identity on their website and occasionally cooperate with law enforcement to help in a prosecution. I thought, once I became aware of Perverted Justice, that it could be very compelling if we could combine and collaborate with their ability to, be decoys online, with our ability to wire a house with hidden cameras and microphones. I thought it would be eye-opening. And I did doubt, though, whether or not we'd see people show up. I mean, I was driving out to the first sting location, and I thought, man, what if I just wasted tens of thousands of dollars of the network's money? And with that, my producer called and said, "Hey, where the hell are you? We've got 2 guys scheduled to show up in 45 minutes. And in that first investigation in Bethpage, Long Island, Ed, we had 17 guys surface over 2.5 days, including a New York City firefighter. So, was that a one-time only event? I didn't know at the time. But your heart's in your throat because you really don't know what you're dealing with. We had security, but we weren't working with law enforcement in that particular investigation. Law enforcement came in later and made a prosecution or two in that case. But, we were testing this out and kind of learning as we went along. But no, there was no preparation for it other than that, I had done obviously a number of spontaneous interviews in the past. I had the transcripts. I prepared as best as I could, but it's live. You are going inside the commission of a felony and showing people that crime as it is actually committed. And it was eye-opening, even for me, who had been, at that point around the world doing investigative reporting.
Yeah. The reason I ask is that, people listen to this show, they're stepping into different spaces in their life. And I think everyone always thinks you have to be completely prepared. There's really no such thing. And you step into this space that really no one had stepped into before. You sort of created a space the way that you did it. And it was riveting. I mean, there's not a person who listens to my show or is watching this who's not familiar with you. I mean, it's became that big of a deal. And I used to watch it and think, I don't know if it ever occurred to you, like, well, that guy could be walking by me in the grocery store.
You would never know.
And that's why I wanted to have you on today, everybody. What today's show is really going to be about is obviously some insights into that show and but also lots of other things about predatory behavior. I want to talk about protecting our children, protecting yourselves if you're single and you're dating, the social media piece of it. But then even offside all of that, how do you know if someone's got ill will towards you? Is there a profile? Someone's predatory with you financially, just antagonistic towards you. So we're going to go all down that road. If you're wondering why Chris is sitting in that seat today, because I think he's the most qualified person on the planet to do it. I'm curious first, Chris, when you meet these guys, you walk in there, did anything strike you about their humanity? In other words, were they otherwise on the surface normal people? Or as you would sit there for 20, 30, 40 minutes, eventually, were there things about them other than obviously the underlying perverted predatory behavior that would give you a clue into who they were that was different?
You know, they come from different categories, Ed. So you may have a guy who walks in who's a doctor or a teacher or somebody even in law enforcement. In a recent investigation, just a matter of months ago in Michigan, we had a prison guard, a Michigan State Corrections officer, walk in to try to have sex with a 14-year-old girl. You know, we're doing these investigations again now, 17 years later, and guys are still showing up. So they come from different categories. You see the legit guy you could be standing next to at the dry cleaners on a Saturday morning, or standing next to you on public transportation here in the New York subway. And then there are obviously guys who, you know, could have the word predator tattooed across the forehead. They look janky, you know, they look like a guy who's looking for trouble. So it's a combination of things. But I think if you're looking for, you know, that common denominator, it's really, really hard to tell on the surface. If you go beneath the surface, you know, and you see things, there are definitely warning signs. But, you know, when you and I were kids, our parents said, don't talk to strangers. And that was good advice then and good advice today. But the problem with online grooming, and the internet has changed all of this in so many ways, is that the person who's a stranger on a Wednesday is so adept at gaining the confidence of a child or anyone really by the end of the week that you think you know this person over the weekend.
Yeah, you use the word grooming, and it's fascinating that you did. A few weeks ago, I had Sarah Klein on. Mm-hmm. Sarah was one of the original, she was one of the original young ladies who came forward that was a victim of Larry Nassar.
Sure.
For USA Gymnastics. And she used that word grooming. Now, he could groom them because he was in there doing physicals with them. But how does that work? I've got a child. Let's give some advice to parents now. You've got a child, they're on Instagram, let's say. How does the grooming work, and what should we be looking out for? Should parents be monitoring the direct messages of their children? Do you advise that? What would your advice be if you have a child?
I think it's not a bad idea, depending on what you see and how old the child is. You know, you need to start with an age-appropriate discussion. And I think sometimes it's as simple as, look, I'm going to trust you to have communication on the internet, to have an Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or, you know, Snapchat, but you need to know that there are adults out there who would like to trick you for a lot of different reasons. And kids don't like to be tricked. So I think it starts there. And if you can get that point across to a child, then you can start to prepare them. There is no real effective demand reduction for this crime, right? It's not a very sexy part of therapy or psychiatry or medicine. Law enforcement does the best it can to bust and incarcerate, punish, monitor these people. But at the end of the day, it's so prolific, this crime, that your best defense is education and awareness. And that starts with an age-appropriate discussion with your kids.
How prolific is it?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, we used to say, 15, 16 years ago when I started talking about this, there was a number that we used to quote, and it was at any given time, 50,000 predators are online. Well, it's a hard number to come up with. And we were challenged on that. And we ourselves went back to where did this come from? And it came from a speech from an attorney general, that got it from the Attorney General of the United States, that got it from one of our stories where we interviewed somebody who was a former FBI agent. And I asked the question, would it surprise you if that were true? He said, no, it could be even higher. So there's no way of really knowing it, is the honest answer, right? common sense would tell you that there are a lot of predators online because we've caught a lot of predators online, not just sexual predators looking to assault children, but financial predators, all kinds of confidence schemes and things that go on every day.
Yeah.
So it's ubiquitous. And we really don't know is the honest answer.
Yeah, that's the thing. And we're going to go there in a minute, but there's things I've always wanted to ask you. And this is going to seem, I might even take some flack for asking you this question, but the first thing is that because of the way movies are made, usually the bad guy in a movie is just a bad guy in every area, right? But the truth is, many of these people have other redemptive qualities.
Absolutely.
And I think that's part of it. He's a great soccer coach or she's an amazing businesswoman, or he's so good with his own children. And so then we automatically categorize that person as there's no way they could be one of those because they have other redemptive qualities. These aren't just all bad people. This is some behavior they have that's perverted or a character flaw. They may have other redemptive qualities, and that should cause us not to discount the possibility they could be doing harm, correct?
That's absolutely right, Ed. And we see this in the predator investigations. We see people who function as an oncologist, for example, at a major biotech firm on the cutting edge of curing cancer. Yet here's a guy who is, going online by tall, dreamy doc, lying about his age, trying to meet up with a 13-year-old girl in Petaluma, California for sex after a sexually charged conversation. Here's a guy who's got daughters, who's married, who has a big job, an incredible education, doing some good for society, but yet in this dark corner of his life was out trolling for kids. And I think, people ask, what's the profile? Well, in terms of my experience, and I'm not a therapist and I'm not qualified to make this judgment, but in my experience, these predators break down into three different categories. There's the heavy hitter, pedophile, predator, child molester who'd be doing this with or without the internet, right? The bad Little League coach, the bad scoutmaster, the guy who's hanging out at the playground or the food court at the mall. They're going to do this. They're hardwired, whether it's because of something in their mind or because of a childhood experience, they're going to go after children. Then there's a younger group, right? 19, 20, 21, 22, socially inept, insecure, thinking that, well, this might be an opportunity to finally have a romantic experience. And maybe the best way to do this is to choose somebody who's emotionally at the same level I am, who happens to be 13 or 14. And if it works out in a couple of years, it's not that big of an age difference. They'll be 16 soon. They look at it as a Romeo and Juliet situation. That's a guy who can be put on probation, punished, warned, and probably never offend. Then we have this much more difficult situation in the middle. I think there's a whole category of guys who may have an attraction to younger boys or girls in their teens.
In their genes.
In their teen. Yeah. These guys are, any age, any adult age, but they have an attraction to younger kids, boys and girls. And they wouldn't act upon this without the internet, without the access to the chat rooms, to pictures. It's addictive. It's 24/7 and it's anonymous. And they find themselves saying things online to somebody who they think is a vulnerable 13, 14, 15-year-old boy or girl that they wouldn't say in person. And then at some point, they blur this line between fantasy and reality. And they may know better. They may suspect it's a Chris Hansen sting operation or an FBI sting operation or any local police sheriff's department. But they do it anyway because they get so caught up in this, fulfilling this fantasy that they blur the line. And the next thing you know, they come knocking at our door. And that's the most difficult part, the most difficult profile to identify, to treat, to punish, and to fix in our society, I think.
Well, now that is fascinating because that sort of helps me while really processing the way you described that, because that behavior manifests itself online now. It has created a space online where this transcends sexual predators.
Right.
And, for example, in my case, people will regularly make fake accounts of Ed Mylett, make them look really good, and then solicit people to buy some cryptocurrency, or if you send me $50. And these are otherwise people that I almost think, because I've actually encountered a few of these people in my last 6 years online, that I think they do blur this line where they forget what they're doing is illegal and hurting another human being. They almost get caught up in the process of it. And this is so prevalent online. Is there anything, do you agree with that, number one? And secondly, is there anything someone listening to this can do to protect themselves from any type of predatory behavior online?
Well, number one, yes, you are right. I think that's an accurate profile of what happens online. And it is this constant blur of fantasy and reality. And because it is such a vast space of potential money making, that it creates opportunity for those who are trying to scam folks. And we've seen it, especially in a difficult economy. I mean, the predator always goes for the most vulnerable, right? And not always do they start out to take advantage.
Yeah.
But once they get a sense of success or how easy it is, and it becomes financially lucrative or emotionally lucrative, they keep going until they get caught. And I suppose it's just the ubiquitous nature of the internet in some respects, but also if you provide an opportunity for bad people to execute this sort of thing, they will do it. I mean, we've seen it in our various investigations of online predators, not the traditional kind in the Hansen versus Predator or To Catch a Predator, but the Onision in Real Life series that we have now on Discovery Plus. Here's a guy who's a YouTube sensation, had a big following, was making millions of dollars, and ultimately crossed the line and started abusing and preying upon his young female followers. And it started a whole investigation, both civil and criminal. And, you know, we did a series exposing that. And the women, the young women who were the targets here, were vulnerable for a lot of different reasons. Some because of their emotions, some because of their talent, their creativity. They felt a kindred spirit with this fellow, who was also somewhat creative, talented. But also because they came from a home that there was freedom enough for them to be approached and to be emotionally taken advantage of by a guy like this. And, you know, you see it among the most wealthy people, the Peter Nygaard investigation,
right.
Same thing, you know. There you have a guy who was not only a predator, but was a moneyed predator. And he could buy this sense of impunity that he had for 45, 50 years. He got away with thousands of sexual assaults. And finally, because of dedicated investigators, a civil lawsuit, you know, that went on between Nygaard and a neighbor who did the right thing, good reporting by us and New York Times and Canadian Broadcasting Network, he finally got exposed. You know, but who knows without this? I mean, Epstein, without the Miami Herald staying on top of this story day after day after day, Epstein probably gets away with it. And the U.S. attorney in New York at the time essentially said that. I mean, it's these guys, they have money, they have connections, they have power, and they can get away with it. And well, so this trickles down as an attitude on the internet.
Aren't they protected, some of them, by the bigger apparatus as well? I think I was reading that you wanted to do something on Epstein or had an inclination about him, or something came up and then it didn't happen. Is that right?
No, it was, you know, that's the lesson of good, dogged reporting. And that's what Julie K. Brown did at the Miami Herald. We had an opportunity, I had an opportunity to look into some of this stuff. And quite honestly, Ed, I tried to fashion a sting operation in New York.
Wow.
The levels of security were so guarded that we weren't able to, you know, penetrate it. And so I got busy with other stories, other topics, other things. And it was the Miami Herald who kept digging away day after day after day after day. And finally got the confidence of these survivors, some of them, to identify themselves and come forward and become very effective witnesses to prosecute this case.
Wow.
You know, so do I regret not pursuing it more aggressively? Yeah, of course. But I'm awfully glad that Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald did. And you know, we've done stories around it. I continue to work on that case a bit here and there. And I think we'll come up with something soon. But, so, you know, it's just a lesson of reporting. You have to, sometimes it's old fashioned legwork and just staying on it and not going for the grand slam hidden camera investigation that wins the day. And that's what won it for the Miami Herald.
Reporting aside, as a human being, what has this work done to you? How's it made you look at human beings differently overall, if it has? I mean, you've seen a side of humanity up close in your face multiple times, really a seat that, aside from maybe a few people in law enforcement, have ever seen. Has it changed the way you look at someone in the grocery store? Has it changed the way you look at the goodness of humans in general? I'm curious as what it's done to you as a man.
Well, it's a great question. And I think there was a time in between that it gave me kind of a dark look at society in general. And you can let yourself get caught up in that if you're not careful. And I think with time passing and perspective, I've developed a much broader, more balanced view of the world. I think that comes with, doing something for 40 years and reaching a certain age in life and having kids who are now adults, two of whom are in this business. You get a perspective that you didn't have at 40, that you now have at 62. And so it allows you not to be too hung up, but to have, a world view of things and to understand how my work can fit into that world view and improve the situation and contribute to the education of people and, to get into the minds of a predator or a criminal and to understand a little bit how that works and to hear the voice of the victim. You can create hopefully an environment where fewer people become victims. And that's kind of what all my work and my reporting is about, is creating that awareness, because at the end of the day, the cops can't arrest them all. We can't catch them all. So if you create this body of work that makes people pay attention just a little closer, you can prevent people from becoming victims. It's like in these interviews with these guys, when they get caught, anybody can jump out of the back room or from behind the bushes and create 10 seconds of dramatic video. My job is to get inside their heads, to get them to talk to me. I'm not out there to beat them up. Of course, as a human being, you get, agitated and angry that somebody would do this to a child. But my job is to understand it and to get them to spill their guts on camera so people can see it. And that's been one of the interesting things about going back and doing the podcast now, which is I immerse myself in each one of these cases. And at the time, I've got the transcripts and, I've got some background and I'm able to think on my feet and deal with these interviews. And unquestionably, even in this dark subject matter, there are, borderline humorous things that happen. And so you have to live in those moments too, because, people see it for what it is. But you gotta, get the truth out of these guys. And that's the job of it all. And I think, especially looking back, as I was saying with the podcast, I mean, you now see the bigger picture. Right? Yeah. Because it may have been a time when two guys were coming in within 10 minutes of each other. Now I can sit back and watch the videos again, look at all the transcripts, see what's happened to the guy since then, know more about his background than I did when he first walked in. And we usually had a pretty good background sheet on the guys. And it gives this fuller picture. And I think in these times when kids are spending more of their days on the internet, especially during the pandemic, and when you think of how many more social media platforms are out there now, it's more important than ever to have this kind of discussion, this kind of education. Remember, when we did the first To Catch a Predator 17 years ago, we merely had decoys in chat rooms on AOL and Yahoo. That was it. That's all we used. Now take a look at the landscape around you today.
Oh, gosh.
Look at what you and I use as men of a certain age in the media to promote our work, to have discussions with followers and viewers and fans. It's exploded. I mean, every day there's a new social media platform that I don't know about where, potentially predators can approach children online.
I was just thinking about TikTok specifically, younger profile. We got some data this week that says Instagram's got about 1.3 billion users. I mean, imagine that number, 1.3 billion, but the TikTok is now at 1 billion and will likely surpass them in the next 6 months. So if there are billions of people on these two platforms, and again, they're overlapping users clearly, but that means there are millions of some form of predators online, whether that's a financial predator, a sexual predator, somebody that it's not 50,000 anymore. somebody that even if you're a woman and you're on a dating app, just a guy who's got no intention but to be physical with you, lie to you about his intentions. To me, that's a bit of a predator. And so
it's absolutely a predator. And let me take it one step further. We did a story a week or so ago on the YouTube channel, Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, on parents who are exploiting their children online. And, you know, you look at these family vloggers, you know, these people who are doing stories about, you know, their families and adopting kids, then rehoming the kids because they've got behavioral issues. We did a story on the case of Danielle Cohen, who's 15 years old. The mother of her is Jen Archambault is essentially pimping this girl out online, making millions and millions of dollars. A young girl who's been doing this since, you know, 11, 12, 13, all her relationships, her pregnancy, abortion, borderline child porn. And all of this makes money for the mother on their YouTube channel. Yet, when we do a story on it, even though we blur any questionable video, we're not monetized because of sensitive social content, which is fine. I don't do YouTube to make money.
I know exactly what you mean.
And I incubate, stories for television. But so yet they're out there doing the exploitation and making the money.
That's crazy.
So you make sense of that.
No, that is nonsensical, and I relate very deeply to what you're saying there. I'm curious, a lot of people are dating. The main place people meet now is online. So it used to be at a bar, or a nightclub, or church, or
the old-fashioned way.
Right. It's like, and I've had great dating experts on my show. And so, man or woman, so I'm meeting a guy who's in my DMs, right? He's in my DMs on Instagram, or I'm meeting a guy who's, I'm on one of these, I don't even know the names of them anymore. I'm on Tinder, whatever it is.
Right.
I don't know. Right. It tells you how old I am and how long I've been married, but you're on these apps. And so you're going to you want to meet people that way. There's got to be some advice you give to somebody. Is it like, hey, meet in a public place, look for, have them show you.
Yeah, all of it, all of that. I mean, you have to just be wary. I mean, obviously, if you're an adult and you're on one of the dating apps, a lot of people meet and have healthy relationships because of that. Tinder and Grindr are set up for different, sort of hookups. But, the traditional dating apps result in healthy, wonderful, long-term relationships. But you just have to know that there are people who will try to exploit that and exploit your good nature. And so, all the common sense things apply, which is take your time, meet for coffee in a public space. Don't put yourself in a situation where somebody can drop a roofie in your drink. Make sure you've got your own way there and own way home. And it's not a bad idea to make sure you tell a friend what you're up to. It's no different than selling a television on Craigslist or on Facebook. Meet in a public place, and preferably next to a police station. I mean, don't set yourself up to become a victim. And it's a little, trickier with adults who meet each other online. And I know people who met their spouses on traditional dating apps. It's not unusual. So
I think it's funny that I named the hookup app.
What? Yeah.
I don't know what the
What does that say about you, Ed?
I don't know.
You're in the no judgment zone.
There are profiles on there from time to time. Someone will screenshot and say, "Is this you?" Yes, that's definitely my picture, but my name is not Joe Mendoza. Yeah, and I don't live in Sarasota, Florida. So even there's that sort of thing. Right. All the fraud online blows my mind. It just blows my mind.
Well, and we saw it. Years ago, we did a piece on some of the financial scams online, and there's an intersection between the financial scams and the sweetheart swindle. You've got these people who think they've met somebody online who's cute and, has a lovely picture in front of some flowers. And it's actually somebody in West Africa who's running a scam. And suddenly they're accepting packages and they're reshipping these things. And this is a single woman in Georgia who's got 5 kids, who's alone and is vulnerable, and likes the companionship online, and will do this thinking that she's getting involved in a business venture with somebody who might also be a romantic potential.
what you're describing there, everybody, what Chris is describing, I know because I'm in the financial space. And so that is much more prevalent than you would think, what he just described. People that are a little bit more advanced in age, having what they think is a romantic encounter with someone who does not exist, that is in some other country, who then that person slowly grooms them, to use Chris's term earlier, to the point where they just begin to bleed them financially. And people have lost their entire life savings this way, slowly but surely. And you'd think there's just no way, it's nonsensical. This grooming, this connection, this blurring that he described the predator uses also happens to the prey. The blurring starts to happen to the person being preyed upon.
That's absolutely right. And then they don't want to believe that it's really a scam, because to accept that means they're not going to see this $250,000 that they invested with this person back. So the Stockholm syndrome clicks in, because they don't want to believe they've been the victim of a confidence scheme. And so then they become very difficult victims for law enforcement. They don't want to come forward. There's a sense of embarrassment, and they're tricky cases to prosecute. We once at NBC, we convinced our bosses to give us a year and more producers than usually are given to a project to out the Nigerian scammers. And it was a hell of an effort. I mean, I had 3 or 4 producers. You know, usually when you do a story, you have a producer and an associate producer. I had 3 or 4 producers rotating in and out, constantly trying to get these guys to come out of the the back rooms and out of wherever, to put together a sting operation where I could confront them. And we did it, but it was, I'm telling you, we were at this for a good 9 months to a year before we could really smoke these guys out. And we had a field day with them. I mean, it was a great story, but, you know, it was expensive. It was aggressive. It was, you know, somewhat dangerous, I suppose. But we traveled, you know, throughout Europe and went to West Africa, and you don't get a chance to do that very often. And because, you know, it was a great story. It became iconic, but it's one story that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and, you know, many months and a lot of manpower to do it. But that's how difficult it is. Now imagine, you know, a mid-sized police department.
Yes.
That's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Right. And that's why these guys get away with it. I mean, I'm convinced that there's a poster of me in virtually every internet cafe in Lagos, Nigeria, and in Benin, West Africa, with, you know, saying, don't talk to anybody who looks and sounds like this. But
it's true.
Because we did.
How do you think your work, Chris, just along those lines, how do you think your work has changed the way, if at all, the way the predator operates? Has your work caused this sort of culture of predatory behavior to alter the way they operate, literally because of you and the sort of dynamic that was set up by the way you did the show? And well,
I think I would like to think that it's a deterrence, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I honestly thought we'd do 3, maybe 4 predator investigations, and I honestly thought that we would not see guys show up, that I'd be taking a nap on the kitchen counter like the Maytag repairman with nothing to do. And that's not the case. I mean, again, 17 years later in Michigan, guys are showing up. Now, we've changed what we do. We had a COVID protocol. We did a lot of things differently, but they're still out there. And guys still walk in and say, oh, you're Chris Hansen. And guys still walk in and don't know who I am. And I don't know whether to be, you know, offended by that or or flattered. But it's not a problem that's going away anytime soon. And people always ask why that is, you know, and I think it's just the nature of the issue. And I think for some people it's an illness, for some people it's a weakness, for some people it's just it's a predator mindset. Mm-hmm. But it also is not a practice of medicine. If you look at it as a psychiatric illness, for instance, and some of it is, if you go to medical school and you graduate and you have the choice of becoming a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills, California, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, or Park Avenue, New York, and make millions of dollars, or what about this? I can study sexual predators and work for the U.S. Marshals and spend my days in federal penitentiaries interviewing hardcore predators. What choice? Now, thank God there are people who do that, you know, right. And I've interviewed them, and they're wonderful, smart, dedicated human beings who devoted their life to this particular practice of medicine. But you can understand why somebody wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, well, I also think part of it is the rush. I feel like sometimes people's lives are so monotonous and unexciting, and they're not chasing a dream. They're idle time for human beings can be a really dangerous thing. And I agree. Sometimes it's, Yeah, I just wonder if sometimes it's just.
I'm sure, and I can't empirically prove this, but I'm positive that there are cases where somebody said, well, let me just take a look at this chat room. Let me just see what's there. There's a young guy or young gal, and what happens if I did have a chat? What happens if I did propose this idea? And again, they're not talking face to face, so they get on this slippery slope where they start saying stuff they wouldn't say face to face. And the internet has changed our whole culture and the way humans communicate. I mean, I tell the story to my kid. I said, when I was in college, nobody had cell phones. Nobody even had pagers when I was in college. We had to leave notes on doors in dormitories. And then people had to write things down on little pink pieces of paper, yellow pieces of paper, and you have to read them. And then you'd have to go to Dooley's bar. And if you weren't there, then it must be at the Alley Eye or must be something like that. You had to find somebody, and we always found the other people. We always did. We always found who we were looking for. But nobody just, texted each other and said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, or here's where we're going to be. Or, kids use Tinder today just to figure out where the other kids are going to be, to either be there or avoid them. I mean, it's a whole different world now.
I have a big theory that attention is something that drives humans. And in an odd way, I think the predator and the prey share this need. In other words, the prey, this child or this person, is just seeking some form of attention they're not getting somewhere else. Maybe they don't have a father in the home. Maybe and I'm not trying to distill down every.
No, but I think again, it all goes back to a vulnerability.
Yep.
And I think a lot of predators have a deep sense of where that vulnerability is, and they can prey on it. I mean, if you look at all the victims, there's a vulnerability. That doesn't mean that it's okay to make them a victim. It just means that a predator can often sense that and move in. I mean, it's the old story, why do you rob the banks? That's where the money's at, Criminals figure that out,
Yeah. Did you ever find yourself, this is the hard question I wanted to always ask you. I'm giving you a little flack for it. I was going to ask it earlier. It's just coming out now. So did you ever find yourself when you're in that kitchen or that living room and this guy's jabbering on and he seems remorseful and he's teary-eyed and I'm a father and I can't believe I did this and I'm an idiot. And did you ever find yourself feeling, this is a tough question, did you ever feel any empathy for the predator?
Yeah. I a couple times specifically. I remember one, and I had conversations about this with some other colleagues. There was a fellow who came into Georgia, a house sting operation we had set up there, and he was an Iraqi vet. And he came in, and I walked out, and I don't know that he had figured out it was me or what was going on. He probably thought I was a cop, but he immediately got down on his knees and put his hands behind his back in the prisoner of war position, as if he had been caught by, Iraqi forces. And he was compliant and he answered all the questions. He was apologetic. He had, reasoning for all this. He had PTSD. None of that, however, forgives the fact that he was very likely going to sexually assault a child and alter that child's life forever. Now, did I feel bad for the guy because he served our country? Because he was having issues, perhaps due to that? Yes. Does that make it okay? Does that excuse what he was about to do? No, but it was a moment of emotional torture for me to, figure out, okay, had this guy decided not to go online today, or had he decided to go, get his tires rotated as opposed to show up here, he wouldn't be facing this. And maybe he would have never acted on this impulse. I don't know. But you can ask yourself those questions, and you can have these emotional and intellectual wrestling matches with yourself. And that's healthy because it makes you think, and it makes you better at what you do for a living, but you can't torture yourself forever over it. Ultimately you have to realize that this was what I chose to do. We did it with integrity and intelligence and some balance to it. And this was the product. You know, and I
That's what
think
it seemed like.
generally speaking, I mean, look, we'll always take heat in certain corners of the journalistic community for being sensational
Exploitive,
or working too close with the police or whatever. But look, I long ago got over that criticism. I long ago realized that by following the path of doing this kind of reporting, I was going to eliminate some more traditional opportunities, right? And I have this conversation. My second son is a reporter on television, and I said, look, did this make perhaps 60 Minutes off the platter? Maybe, but this is what I chose to do. I'm comfortable with the legacy that I'm creating, and I think as a whole, I was more cutting edge than worried about being more traditional. And it's no use analyzing it to death because I already did it,
That's right.
I mean, I joke with people all the time. My two oldest kids went to a private school in Connecticut, and having a father on television wasn't a big deal because they went to school with kids whose dads were captains of industry and sports and all kinds of things. And it wasn't until South Park did a Chris Hansen To Catch a Predator parody that suddenly I was the coolest dad.
Now you're a big deal.
Yeah, I was on South Park, So,
South Park.
but that it is what it is. I tell my sons this all the time. I said, look, I'm not saying that you have to go do what I did or do it the way I did it, but realize that you're as you chart your path, there are consequences to it, and you have to be comfortable with those decisions, even though, sometimes they're made for you.
Yeah, but Chris, here's the truth. We've all made mistakes. You've made mistakes in your personal life. Everybody has those mistakes happen. But
sure.
The truth is, it's very rare in your industry and your work that the actual work, it sincerely probably saved lives.
I'd like to think so.
What if it saved one? And we know it's more than that, right?
Then it's worth it. And to me, again, it's a dialogue and awareness that didn't exist before.
That's right.
And if part of that is due to a cartoon show, well, so be it. At least it's an intelligent, biting, cutting-edge, well-written cartoon show.
You, by the way, had the temperament to do this. There are other guys that are investigative reporters or journalists on television that their temperament could have changed the tone and the environment when that walkout happened. There's something to your presence. And by the way, this is just something for everybody to learn in communication too. There was something to the way that your presence, your energy was brought into the room that created an environment that was dynamic between you and this predator. And everyone should be conscious of their energy and how they walk into a space. You don't walk into every room the same way. You walked into that room that way. I'm curious, take us into it for a minute. What are you feeling when you're coming around that corner? And what are you feeling typically from the person who you lock eyes with? What is that? That is a moment that 99.99999% of all human beings will never experience in their life, which you've experienced multiple times. Is it the same every time for you and the other person?
No, it's different every time. It's different every time because, each individuals, there are some similarities, right? Some guys are going to have the same excuse and you're prepared for it and you've thought about it since the last guy gave you that excuse. So you have a really good comeback to that, right? Too bad for that guy because I'm really ready for him and I'll have his lunch. But generally, it's the rule that I have for every interview, which is to be a good listener and to not be afraid of dead air. Mike Wallace was a great teacher of that in spontaneous controversial interview. And that is, sometimes you got to go for it and get it while you have the opportunity. But at the same time, if you've got that person in a controlled environment, there's nothing wrong with asking a simple question like explain and letting them hang there on the hook until they say something. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation, especially in the predator cases, where I thought it was over. I thought the guy was never going to give it up. And I kept at it, and kept at it, and kept at it. And finally said, just explain to me what was going on in your mind. And finally you see the switch go and the guy says, well, it started here. I was this age and I kept getting older and the kids kept the same age or getting younger. And they give you some sense of what happened. Now it might be all at the end of the day. and a big excuse, but at least you have some sense of what this guy is about and how they got there, you know?
Do you think that a couple more things? I'm fascinated by, I mean, this is like, for me, there's a conversation many years in the making of wanting to ask these questions. I know it is for my audience too. Do you think that, forecast a little bit, you've been in this space a while. Is there a future that you see coming where predatory type people change their behavior? Is there another venue or forum other than just online? Is anything you see that we should be looking out for that's sort of the next level, right? As you've said, we didn't have text and phone back in the day. Now we've got Instagram and TikTok and dating apps. Is there anything on the horizon?
I think whatever the next thing is, people will try to exploit it, you know, whether it's, you know, another level of communication, you know, another level of internet connectivity. You know, we see it with the interactive video games. You know, that's another thing. People think, well, the kid's safe playing a video game. Well, they don't know who's on the other end of that. Maybe you say they're, you know, Sam Johnstone from wherever, but you don't know who that really is, you know. So I think it's really, it's the same predatory behavior taken to the next level and exploiting whatever technology is available. I mean, in the old days, you know, you could sell the same tractor 6 times at the bus station, you know, to the same guy looking to buy a tractor. And you could get away with it about, you know, 7 times before the sheriff would figure out what you're up to. And today, you know, it's just, all you need is a picture of the tractor. And, you know, people sell stuff multiple times, you know, all the time online. So you got to be careful.
I was going to just add to what you're saying that, you know, I'm a target for certain people just because of, you know, net worth or whatever, or reach. And I just want to share with the audience that when someone doesn't usually come right directly at me with their thing they'd like to get from me, it trickles over time, and it can seem like a very normal relationship in the beginning, even for an extended period of time. But what I didn't know was in the back of their mind, they were waiting for that moment where I was the most comfortable, I was the most vulnerable, I was the most trusting. We are being groomed by people for different things other than just what Chris is experiencing or experienced. So that's true, isn't it, Chris? There's a grooming that someone who's trying to get something from you.
I mean, I've seen it, you know, I've seen it in my life. I mean, you know, I've said to people, I said, do you really think that I'm the guy you want to try and con? How do you think that's going to possibly go? And mostly it's people, you know, make up a story, but it's happened a couple of times where, you know, I've caught somebody trying to take advantage, or an online scam, or, you know, the typical phone calls you get when you know it's somebody trying to get money from you for some nefarious reason. And you know, that you can tell because they'll say Christoph, or, you know, be half the name that doesn't fit on their readout sheet. And no, put an ER on that, or take the off that. And does that name sound at all familiar to you? Oh my God, sorry about you.
They picked the worst dude.
Yeah, could you pick a worse human being to screw on this day?
That is precious. My last question, I'm curious.
Sure.
I think redemption, but I think I've always in my mind thought when it came to sexual predators, physical abusers, I've just sort of always, that's been a category that I went, nope, they're not redeemed. They don't come back. They don't get a second chance. I'm just being candid about everything. Liars, cheaters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, philanderers, bad people, gossipers, they can all be redeemed and changed. Those 2 categories for me have always been, nope, they're not redemptive. No way, no how ever would I trust them again.
Well, I think there's a category of predators who can never be reformed. I think there definitely is you know, a group, and no matter what you do or how you punish or anything else, they're going to figure out a way to prey. They're hardwired to do it, and that's probably, at least in my experience of 30 of these guys, you're never going to change them. And they're going to be, and we've seen them get out. We've seen them reoffend. We've seen guys who successfully go on to have productive lives. And, you know, I think there are categories that with monitoring and probation and some sort of treatment, I think they'll be fine. But we've also had guys in prominent positions who, the therapist and had their parole officer visit, and they're not supposed to have a device that has access to the internet, and the phone rings while they're in with the therapist and the probation officer, and they're caught red-handed with the phone. I mean, it's like, come on, Jesus, could you at least try?
My gosh.
But they can't be reformed in some cases.
Thank you for today.
Thank you. No, what a treat, Ed, and thanks for having me on, and I appreciate the thoughtful conversation, and good luck to you and all your endeavors, and let's do it again.
I think you're wonderful. And guys, I think Predators I've Caught is something I cannot wait to hear. I mean,
thank you for that.
I'm riveted. I'm accused of being addicted to your program and addicted to you in terms of the work that you've done. And it's really true. If I've missed one, I've missed one, because I think I've seen all the other ones.
Well, we had more coming. So, and I think we'll have a little announcement on that next month or so. So I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, follow Chris on Instagram, you guys. Today was a little bit of a different take because I want you, your family protected. I want you thinking about people that are grooming you for all kinds of different things. And I think grooming is that word of someone sort of working on you towards some ill-gotten means, some ill-gotten intent in your life. And we have literally the world's expert on the show today, too. Plus, you're just fascinating. I know everybody wanted to hear from you today. So thank you, Chris Hansen.
Thank you, Ed. I truly appreciate it. It was great to be here.
I enjoyed it. All right, guys. Hey, share today's show. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube if you're listening to the audio. If you're listening to audio, go over there and get on YouTube because there's different content there as well. God bless you all. Max out.